Hi, I'm Bryan.
And I'm AJ.
And we have a podcast called The Director's Wall,
examining a filmmaker's career, film by film. First up was M. Night Shyamalan, then Francis Ford Coppola. Who's next? Is there anything to this whole auteur theory? Find out on
The Director's Wall.
Subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your preferred listening platform.
I'm Larry Bishop, and you're listening to The World Is Wrong podcast.
We're here to tell you how the world is wrong. The world is wrong about
the brown bunny?
Welcome to The World is Wrong, an extreme positive podcast celebrating films the world is wrong about. I'm your extremely positive host, Andras Jones, and
I'm also positive and a host named Bryan Connolly.
I'm positive that you're Bryan Connolly. You may seem less positive about that, but something that we are both positive about, that most of the world is either hostile to, ignorant of, or scornful of, is the film that we're covering on today's podcast. What are we covering, Bryan?
We're covering Vincent Gallo's written, directed, starring, edited, shot by film The Brown Bunny, a much hated and strangely loved by some film from 2003. A tough time in America, a tough time for people watching this movie. I'm excited. This was one of the few movies that we both, like a year ago when we started this or a little, I guess, yeah, almost a year ago when we started this podcast, we were like, well, that's one of the movies we got to do. And I wonder if Mad Dog Time hadn't existed, maybe this would have been our first episode. I don't know. It's definitely like you're waving a flag and making a strong statement that you like a movie that a lot of people hate with this one, for sure.
Yeah, it's an experience. Vincent Gallo is an extremely divisive person, just as an individual, and he made a film that is true to character. Two, really, Buffalo 66, but this one, is not trying to make friends, right?
Yeah, Buffalo 66 is the friend that you make, and then maybe a year later you're like, do I want this friend around? This is kind of a toxic friend. But Brown Bunny is like, I'm not going to be friends with that person.
And yet, there's something that, first of all, I think both films are, just from a filmmaking standpoint, are really something. If you like films, then you can't see everything. There are going to be some films that turn you off, some films where the bar to entry is too much, and that bar to entry might just be, I don't like to watch films with subtitles. Well, that's a rough one, but if that's your bar to entry, then it's yours, whatever. And Vincent Gallo certainly has offers many bars to entry, but like anything that's a great work of art, Hitchcock has things that make him hard to approach if they hit you wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think it's actually unfair to compare them. I think we are here. That's what our point is, to say that Vincent Gallo made two great films. We're going to be talking about one of them here, The Brown Bunny. In our rotation, it is one that you chose, but as you say, it's one that we both love, and we are both championing this film with gusto and a great deal of fear as to what we are setting ourselves up for by even associating with it. But I feel like that's kind of what a podcast like this is about. The World is Wrong means throwing our arms around unpopular characters
or unpleasant
films,
things,
that have merit, even if that merit is to expose something that is unpleasant. Mm-hmm. So, speaking of exposing something unpleasant, let's play a clip from this film, and because so much of what's pleasant about this film is what we see. What you're about to hear, anyway. And then
gotta play something.
And then we just play a motorcycle going for.
I love that. Let's do that. Let's just play the first scene of motorcycles driving on a track for 3 minutes. Let's just 3 minutes of motorcycle sounds. This will be like those videos people watch on YouTube where it's just sounds of things that like calm you. The sound of motorcycles.
Yeah, like in the Hot Rock. It's what Charlotte Ray listens to for fun.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
You know what? I'm in honor of this film. I'm going to do that. So, folks,
I love it.
if you want to I don't know how long that clip is, but it'll be going for a little bit, and just try and get into the zone. Honestly, if you really listen to this, it'll put you in a really unique place.
Yes.
And I don't know. Welcome to the world of the Brown Bunny.
I love it. All right, well, I guess it's my turn to tell you the plot, to tell everyone the plot of this film. Pretty simple plot. This is not a plot-driven movie, but here's what the plot is if you need it. This is back of the box. Pretty basic. Vincent Gallo plays Bud Clay, a motorcycle racer. He's traveling across the country doing some races. He is clearly a very damaged, very sad man. He has a lot of mumbling, kind of looks down a lot, seems depressed. He interacts with a few women across America, all named after a flower. You got a lily, you got a rose, you got a violet. He has these kind of strange little intimate moments with these women. It's kind of the only time where he seems to open up to anybody. He drives a lot. That's about 70 minutes of the movie. Then for the last 25 minutes, he's in a hotel room with his girlfriend Daisy, played by Chloe Sevigny. They have definitely some unspoken things between the two of them. There is strong emotion. They have a very intensely intimate moment, a pornographic intimate moment. And then you find out, spoilers, if you haven't seen this movie, watch it, because I'm going to spoil something. This is the Shyamalan twist here.
Yeah, really, don't... Wait, just give it a second. If you haven't...
Okay, give us a... Turn it off. Okay, you've turned it off. Okay, now the people are here that have seen the movie.
Okay.
She's dead.
Oh,
this is her...
Geez, she's...
And she's like... This is like her ghost, or this is like his dark memory, his memory of this horrible situation that happened. The end. So, if that description doesn't appeal to you, maybe this movie isn't for you. But again, that is just the plot, which is not really what this movie is. This movie is an experience. This movie is true filmmaking. This is true visual storytelling, Like, you could say the plot, you could read the 8-page script, and it won't tell you at all what it's like to actually experience and watch this film.
Yeah, it's so funny. Your description was a great description, first of all. Good job. Good job. And if I was to describe the movie, I would describe it totally differently.
I want to hear, you know what? Let's do 2. I want to hear yours.
I haven't written it out, but basically,
Just
it's about this motorcycle rider. We start there. He's a motorcycle rider, but then we find out that this motorcycle rider is a creep in a van driving around lying to and sort of like humiliating women of all ages. And on the way, he goes and visits his girlfriend's mother, talks to her about her brown bunny, and tells the mother that they live together in California. And if we've watched Buffalo 66, we know that Vincent Gallo is the kind of guy who lies to his mother about his girlfriend. And then he's sad and he's depressed, and he goes to a hotel in Los Angeles where Chloe Sevigny shows up and gives him the most heartbreaking blowjob in cinema history, very graphically. And then we find out that she was never there in the first place, and that this is all has been his, I don't know, mourning, sad, depressing journey to come to grips with the fact that she's dead because of his cowardice. And then he drives off alone, a existential, I don't know, not even hero, an existential, like just a total existential character.
Yeah.
A man with no name, Bud Clay. He's a bud. He's potential. It's all potential, right? He's nothing. He's a cinematic device. Anyway, yeah. So yours is totally accurate. But when I watched it, just how much of it is just like, okay, he is the guy that you're worried about. He shows up if the music were different, when the van shows up, it's like, we just came out of watching Jennifer's Body. Like, this is the van you don't want to get in, Jennifer.
This is the one that killed Jennifer.
Yeah.
Bud Clay killed Jennifer in Jennifer's Body.
Not really. Well, not really. It turns out that he's more, but like, I guess inherent in all of this is it's really hard not to watch it and think, well, at least, like, the whole time you're thinking, well, at least he didn't kill her. But that's a weird place for a movie to put you in.
But you could kind of read it as maybe he did because of his cowardice and his lack of action.
No, I'm just thinking about the girl at the very beginning. So let's talk about. Okay, so that was my take on it. How is the world wrong about this, Bryan? You deserve to do this one.
So this movie is famously hated. There's certain movies that are famously hated where people, when they hear the title, the first thing they think of is, oh, that's that movie that a lot of people hated a lot. Like, Ishtar's one of those movies. Mad Dog Time's certainly one of those movies. Like, the type of movie that is considered to be, like, one of the most hated movies of all time. And it definitely has a history. The story behind it's really funny, actually. It's really interesting. So it premiered at Cannes. A different version of the movie, mind you. It was 26 minutes longer. And supposedly in that 26 minutes, it was 5 more minutes of the motorcycles at the beginning. Literally 5 more minutes of that. What you heard that seemed to take forever to start our episode. Imagine 5 more minutes of that. And more of him driving and just like kind of more of the arty, longer shit, I guess. It was booed at its premiere at Cannes. Like, the audience booed. Like, I think they started booing like while the movie was playing. Like, they didn't politely wait for the end. They were very French about it and very opinionated and started booing immediately. Roger Ebert, during the movie, supposedly got up in front of the screen and started dancing and singing in the Rain. That he was just dancing in front of it, just like he was just kind of like waving his arms in front of the screen while everyone was booing. It kind of basically turned into the theater at the end of Gremlins when they're all in the movie theater and they're all going crazy. That's in my mind the audience, like, but in a negative way. Like if the Gremlins all hated Snow White, if the Gremlins hated Snow White and they were throwing a fit, that would be like what the Brown Bunny premiere was. Vincent Gallo then hexed Roger Ebert's colon, put a hex on his colon. Roger Ebert then went in for chemotherapy or whatever, not for his colon, but for his, I think for his throat. And then Roger Ebert and him kind of got into like a back and forth, the kind of a feud of like Roger Ebert just saying like, you know, like I may have cancer that we go, but you're the person who always made Brown Bunny. Like I'm paraphrasing, but they dissed each other. It became into like a Tupac versus Biggie sort of battle of film people, like which we rarely get. We rarely get like two people like really going at it over a movie, and that's what happened with this. Then Vincent Gallo re-edited the movie, cut out 26 minutes. Roger Ebert ended up giving it a thumbs up. Clearly like the peace was made. He was like, you know what, Gallo, you did make a great movie. You just had to cut those 26 minutes out. And so then like peace had been made, but the damage was already done by all of that stuff before that, and it came in with quite a reputation. And people who saw this movie, knowing that reputation, are people who were really excited to see the next movie from the guy who made Buffalo 66, were kind of dismayed / bored by just watching a dude drive in a van for 70 minutes. Like literally, that's what a lot of this movie is him just driving and looking sad and shots out the bug splattered windshield, driving around. And then of course the very graphic sex scene, the real sex, like not unsimulated, was also very off-putting for people. Like this is, you got to remember, this is like a good few years before we all had porno in our pockets with our iPhones. So like a lot of people still weren't used to just jumping into the hardcore sex world. And the fact that it was an actress that people knew, and it was a lot of questions of like, is this okay? Is this okay that she's doing this? Was she okay with this? Like, so it made a lot of...
Speaking of Chloe Sevigny.
Yes. And so a lot of people just sort of getting, disturbed by this movie and upset by this movie. And it didn't help that Vincent Gallo kind of, fanned those flames by just sort of like being very open and opinionated and angry all the time during the whole process of this movie coming out. And not really. He would kind of switch back and forth between giving a shit and not giving a shit, but all the time being very loud and opinionated. And so the world is wrong because of all of that, and because of all of that baggage. A lot of people won't watch this movie, or will just go in already kind of made up, thinking like this movie is garbage. I'm gonna now sit through this garbage. I don't know who would do that. I would imagine a lot of people would just end up turning this movie off after like the motorcycle scene, like I think a lot of people probably haven't sat through this whole movie.
Yeah.
That was a long answer.
Well, I'll just add my 2 cents to my main thing really is just that when people talk about this movie, they become 7th graders. In the sense of like, it's the movie where you like Brown Bunny? Is it because of the blowjob scene? Is it because like it's either offensively like people who are like prurient about it, of like, oh, like it's pornography and it's really hot, that you're like, oh, that's what I heard about that, and that's gross and a conversation that doesn't. It's not what I'm looking for when I want to talk about this film. Or it's people who are very offended about the film, and I actually have more of a conversation I can have with those people, but a lot of times that's a more charged conversation and can be like, you're not going to convince someone who sees some of this film. If you've experienced situations like this with guys like Vincent Gallo, or just guys or anyone, I can understand watching this film and that barred entry is like, no, this is traumatizing. Fuck this. And this guy is not cool. Fuck that. Like, that's a totally valid response to this film.
Definitely.
It doesn't leave much room for a conversation about how good it is too. So to me, it's like, what I always wanted to say to people who just want to make it all about the blowjob, because that's really, people aren't offended by it being boring. It's fine if this movie was boring. If it didn't have what looks like a semi non-consensual blowjob at the end of the movie, it would be a lot easier to talk about it. No one would want to, probably, but it would be easier to talk about. And that, to me, misses the whole point, and which what I was saying in my description, which is that it's not that there's a blowjob at the end of this movie. It's that it is the saddest. Like if I told you I was going to make a movie where the climax of it was a totally heartbreaking, real pornographic blowjob with two actual real Hollywood movie stars, and I'm going to get that movie made, and that movie's going to be artsy as fuck and boring.
And that's the thing that I love is I really hope that out there somewhere a bunch of like 14-year-old boys are like, oh, I can't wait to watch. I heard this movie, The Blowjob, and then they sit through Gordon Lightfoot music while cars are driving, in the rain. I kind of like that. I kind of hope that happened.
Yeah, so that's I feel like how the world is. The sort of the general how the world is wrong in terms of how we've experienced it. Now, I want to ask you, what was it about your experience of this film when it came out, when you saw it, that invited you in and allowed you to experience the film in a way that is not what we just talked about?
I think I'm trying to remember because I definitely came in I loved Buffalo 66. I loved that movie. I saw that movie when it came out when I was a teenager. And that was just definitely part of that wave of exciting kind of mid-90s indie movies that just seemed so different and interesting with their distinct voices. Because that movie was about 96, I think, something like that.
98.
90. Oh, really? 98. So, that was very exciting to me. And I had already heard all this shit about this movie. But I was also kind of really well trained before I saw this movie because, my good friend Adam at the time, him and I were into this kind of movie. We were into these sort of kind of long shot, experimental, strongly visual storytelling movies like the films of Claire Denis, like Beau Travail, or like a Pola X, or just sort of these kind, which also has a blowjob in it. But these kind of this era of art film, and when going into the movie, I wasn't expecting this movie to be like that. I heard that people thought it was boring. I heard that about all the controversial stuff, but watching it, and it was at the Capitol Theater, and I'm sure that's when you saw it too. I was just mesmerized by it. It really was one of the few truly hypnotic movies. I kind of put this up there with 2001: A Space Odyssey or Enter the Void as a movie or Stalker, as a movie that really is just hypnotic, where I'm just pulled into the images and it's almost like I'm dreaming and I'm just sucked in, and it could have been 8 hours long and I would have just sat there and just watched this movie. It's for a movie where the main character doesn't really talk much, and when he does, it's really quiet. I was so drawn into it. I was so just fascinated by everything about this movie, the music, the shots, the acting, the story. It really just sucked me in strong. No pun intended.
There you go, man. There you go. Oh,
See, no. I'm a bonehead guy too. I didn't mean to do that.
Bonehead.
But I mean, it really
bonehead.
Oh
really?
my God, it's still going. But oh God, damn it. But anyways, yeah, this movie is just there's something very unique about it. There's something very. I don't know if it's a personal movie. I hope not. But there's definitely a strong, just strong intimacy going on in this movie that it's rare, and even in indie films. And this came out too at the time when indie films started to be garbage, when they started to just be business cards to make a big movie. This is sort of the trickle time, when this came out, and this movie's definitely not asking for him to make a Marvel movie or anything. This is definitely a mic drop sort of movie.
Well, yeah. I mean, oh boy, I don't really want to try and get into the intention in this film. It's tough because I think we mentioned it on an earlier episode. We made I don't want to say mistake, but we made the choice to, like Vincent Gallo's Instagram and follow his Instagram for a week. And then we made the choice to stop doing that. And, so he's a divisive character. Let's just say that Vincent Gallo probably wouldn't like us.
Definitely.
And he would not, and we would probably not like him. We might be a little bit more entertained by him than he would be by us, just because he's a compellingly interesting person. And if I only had to deal with him for a little while, I've told you the story about when I went out to coffee with Eric Roberts and was really uncomfortable, right?
No, I'd never heard this story. Please tell me this story.
Really?
Yes. What happened with you and Eric? Is this a My Dinner with Andras sort of thing?
No,
but to
it was
the
just really weird. So I was auditioning for, I think it was Pacific Heights.
Oh wow. Okay.
And he was auditioning as well for something. So I think that's the time period. And we were both there at the same time. And I was impressed that he was Eric Roberts and he wanted to talk to somebody. And then so on the way down, we ended up leaving at the same time. And we were in the elevator. He was like, hey, you want to go for some coffee? I was like, yeah. Okay. And then he just proceeded to tell one tall tale after another. And like, I'm a yes and kind of person, so I'm not going to be confrontational if someone's telling me, oh yeah, when I was a rodeo cowboy, that's when I got this hitch in my thigh. And yeah. And then I was the roadie for Def Leppard for a year and a half. And those are two things that he specifically said. And I was like, really? Whoa. But, like, and to a certain point where it just sort of became like, I just started to be like, okay, yeah, I would just passive aggressive. I was kind of like passive aggressive. Like, I'm now listening but that I don't believe what you're saying. It was just the weirdest thing. And then he was like, okay, done. And he got up and left. I want to say without paying the bill, but I'm pretty sure I guess my point is that I have an idea. Like, I feel like I would have about that much patience for Vincent Gallo. Like, oh yeah, you want to invite me to coffee? Okay. Okay. Oh, now you're being really weird. Okay. I'm putting up with this to a certain point, and then I'm emotionally checking out and being like, okay, well, I'm going to let you end this because I'm still going to keep watching, which is kind of the way I feel about this movie. Like, okay. Yeah. I saw it. My first time seeing it was at the Capitol Theater as well in Olympia, Washington. And also being totally hypnotized by it. And it's one of those films where that first scene that we played you, it really is a compelling bit of filmmaking for how, I don't know, kind of it's a combination of very lo-fi and super inventive in a way that kind of does have you questioning, how did he do that? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, he just does the cinematic magic trick on all these levels, with sound, with cinematography, with visual storytelling, with introducing a character. It's just, yeah, it's just awe-inspiring work as a director. Like, mm-hmm. I challenge anyone who loves film and directing to watch the first 5 minutes and not just be like, okay, well, he's good. You don't have to watch the rest of it. From there on, I feel like it goes into places where I can totally understand why you wouldn't want to get into this guy's van. You know, that van is a much safer place for me and Bryan than for some other people in our audience. Yeah. So depending upon how you feel about that, bring Jennifer along with you. If you decide to go on this movie, imagine Jennifer's by your side. And if things get out of hand, at least, and Vincent Gallo's not going to treat you he's going to treat you a lot better than Adam Brody's character treats you in Jennifer's body. Although Adam Brody would seem like he'd be I would have a more pleasant time on the way to getting killed with Adam Brody, I think, than just riding alongside Vincent Gallo. think that would be an unpleasant ride. Again, other than being he's such a compelling figure. The fact that the ability to make this film is in that like ugly, beautiful face thing, and he knows how to use it. I'm a sucker for this. Is when actors know how to use themselves as an instrument, as a writer director, and he sure does. So it's such a mixed bag because he's repellent and he's also incredibly charismatic, and he plays characters who are repellent and charismatic. And again, I get why you might lean towards the repellent, but there's still something that is, in a world where everyone's trying to be liked, I really appreciate it's not just the pornography that's pornographic in this. Vincent Gallo in the film is revealing sort of his ugliness throughout in ways that I think is as laudable as an artist, more interesting, more useful artistically than celebrations of heroism in a way that like what Steve Shainberg was talking about in his interview in the Fur episode. Like Hollywood just wants to make movies about people who are heroes. Actors just want to play people who have heroic arcs. And it's like, okay, here's someone who I don't think has any interest in being seen as a hero.
Not at all.
So do you want to speak to your experience of Gallo? Like, how do you navigate loving this film and having been Vincent Gallo's Instagram friend for a week?
It's hard. It really is sort of like, it's interesting because I'm guilty of this. I'll give people exceptions because they make good art, but I won't do that if they're like own a donut shop. So there's some weird thing, like if I heard that like there was an anti-Semitic donut shop, I would not buy those donuts. No matter how good they were, I would find another donut. But if somebody made a movie and they were kind of despicable, but I liked the movie, it's harder for me. And this is an argument and a conversation we've had many times at the video store when Vulcan Video was around. Like it was always a conversation about anybody, like all these people, like, oh, I heard he's a jerk. Or like, especially if someone was in Hollywood like you, where it's like you have more of a window into people's personalities that aren't even on Instagram. So if you're like, oh, I love so-and-so, like, oh, well, he's a real raging asshole. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that. It's like, oh, he's good at hiding it, but oh, man. And then they're like, well, can I watch a movie by a horrible asshole? So I don't know. Like, it's definitely like a hard thing to be like, I invite this movie into my house, but I would not invite Vincent Gallo into my house. But aren't I already doing that by inviting this movie in which he wrote, directed, starred, and edited, shot? Like, it's him. So it's like it's a weird thing. Art is a weird thing like that, Does it make it better if he's dead? And in 30 years, can we enjoy this movie knowing that he's not around, not making money off of it, not using that money to be a jerk to people? I don't know. It's a real hard... like his Instagram account is not a thing I enjoyed seeing pop up on our feed. It really was depressing. But I don't know. But like, I love his two movies a lot. Like, but he doesn't hide in his two movies that he's a jerk. Like, it's not like he made two movies where he's feeding the poor and being like the ultimate gentleman, So like, it's not a surprise that he's a jerky guy, because he's a jerky guy in his movie. He's a really jerky guy in his movies. So I don't know. Like, is that honesty make it more more easier to digest? I don't know. Like, yeah, I think it would have been harder if he made movies where he was trying to be Abraham Lincoln or whatever, But
well, then that's the thing is he'd get away
sense?
with it. Like, well, if he was, look, I'm not saying that I know people who, well, actually I do. I do know people who hold views that I consider to be as repugnant as Vincent Gallo's, and who have behaved in ways that I found objectionable in terms of their power dynamics with people because of what they desired, whether that was a sexual thing or just abusing power. And a lot of those people go out of their way to portray themselves as really groovy. Like, they get away with it because they are good at, they're able to portray themselves as nice people. And so I just find there's something in art. I think that there's something, again, laudable about, if you're going to make movies in which it's, I'm the director, I'm the star, I'm the cinematographer, it's me, then you better be exposing something that you're troubled about in yourself, that's worth working out in front of us all. Because if all you want to do is show off what a great fighter you are, like, ugh, that to me actually is at a way lower vibration. I'm less comfortable inviting that into my home than a weird piece like this. It made me think, as I was thinking about this, there's something, my father was a dream psychologist, and one of the things that he told me when I was a kid about when I would have nightmares about, actually there was a big bad wolf in like a kid's storybook, and it used to I used to have nightmares about this big bad wolf, and he would say, if you really want to not have nightmares about the big bad wolf, the thing to do is to think about it before you go to sleep. And if you really think about it before you sleep, then your brain won't need to work it out, and you'll be fine. And it totally worked, and it's always worked. I've never had a repeat nightmare in my life.
That's what you're supposed, like, because I'm in therapy right now, and that's totally what my therapist tells me, is like the things that bother me, I'm supposed to kind of embrace those things and tell my brain, okay, like, let's be uncomfortable. Okay, let's be upset. And that's so much easier to get over it than it is to try to fight it and run away from it. Exactly. Like, it's a weird thing. It doesn't seem like it. That's how it should be, but it totally works.
Well, it's because
that's how
yeah. That's how we work. That's how we work through these things, and that's how dreams work. And I'm of the belief that film, particularly, I think art in general, but film is probably the most dreamlike of the arts. Mm-hmm. And so, a film like this, to me, The Brown Bunny, is kind of a nightmare. It's beautiful, it's haunting, it's troubling. If you really think of its implications, it's even more troubling. Mm-hmm. But if we don't kind of embrace it psychically, like, I feel when I was watching this and Buffalo 66, this is all, they were made pre-Me Too. Now, all the Me Too stuff, when people say pre-Me Too, that stuff, people knew what was going on because it was happening to them or their friends, or they were doing it, or they were not seeing it. You've talked about going into meetings and just the air of what we now call toxic, and what was then just sort of like, no, that's how, that's what you want to do to blah, blah, blah. That's how you got to talk to work in this business. Man, woman, whoever, you got to know how to talk tough like this about this stuff, because that's how professionals talk about cocks and cunts and whatever. And and you're like, what the fuck? I come from Olympia. We don't know how to talk like that.
We don't say those words.
Right. Right. So I guess my point is that there's something about this film, and this is what I want to get to, because I think watching it again and knowing we were going to talk about it, it was a different experience than just watching it and liking it or talking with you about it. And watching the sex scene, the blowjob scene with Chloe Sevigny, there's a negotiation before it that you can't tell. And Vincent Gallo sets this up in all of his dynamics with the different women he talks to, where you can't quite tell if they're interacting with him as the director or as the character. Like, maybe they feel like improvs, and then he's always kissing them, and it feels like, there's something that I don't want to say it's non-consensual, because they're all there and they're all in the film but there's something, the feeling of skirting the edge of consensuality runs throughout this film. And then it ends with this act that goes on, has historically gone on in Hollywood in hotel rooms a lot. And we found out after Me Too was totally going on with all of the people who sneered at the brown bunny for having a blowjob in it. And were happy to play like they were heroes for being offended by this movie. And I don't think that Vincent Gallo is a hero for making the movie, but artistically, I feel like that's a heroic goal, is to make stuff that's so true, exploring your own dirty little power trips, that it's ahead of its time in exposing something that was just universal. And not want to say universal because it wasn't everyone was doing it, but it was universal enough to be an experience which has now become this massive movement that's based upon the idea of almost every woman being able to say, yeah, me too. Something like some guy tried to get me to do something in a hotel room I didn't want to do. And here we have that being portrayed, acting wise or not. And Chloe Sevigny has come out and said, she celebrates this film, and I celebrate her right to say what she consents to. But when I watch the film, it doesn't look like she's 100% consenting as an actor. And then I think, well, if Vincent Gallo was guilty, wouldn't he want to portray that as consent? And instead he portrays it as kind of not consent, and kind of not consent doesn't reflect well on him or his film. And then that becomes more heroic. Even though I don't think he's heroic, there's something about this film that stirs that inspiration in me. Like, I wish I was this, I aspire to be this courageous in my ego trips.
It's interesting because the movie originally starred, I think it was Winona Ryder and Kristen Dunst were not Daisy, but they were like going to be Lily or Rose or whatever, or Violet. And then they dropped out because they did not get along with Vincent Gallo, or vice versa.
Well,
and they never gave an interview saying what happened. Like, I would be interested to hear from them two what it was where they were like, no, I'm not going to be in this fucking movie. I don't want to do this. Like, it'd be interesting. Like, I wonder who, like, I'm assuming Kristen Dunst was going to be the girl at the beginning who works in like the convenience store, who gets kind of wooed by him quickly, and then brought on this possibility of a trip, and then he just ditches her. And maybe Winona Ryder was going to be the Cheryl Tiegs character, or maybe she was the prostitute in Vegas. I don't know which of those characters they were going to be. They didn't say. But I mean, like, Kristen Dunst is okay working with Lars von Trier, but didn't want to work with Vincent Gallo. So Lars von Trier, another, difficult filmmaker and human being. So I wonder just sort of like what, I mean, it could have just been creative differences, for all we know, but maybe they just didn't jive with how he was doing this. I don't know. But they, they said no, which is great. They left and they didn't do it.
That's called consent. It's a great thing. You can say no to something, it's very powerful. And they did, which is, that's the one clip that I've seen. You've seen the Brown Bunny with the director's commentary. I haven't, but
oh my God,
there's just one tiny little clip of it from the very beginning of the movie on YouTube, like maybe a 1.5-minute clip. I might even just drop it in here.
There's Captain Ugly. I wonder if I'm ugly from all angles, but as you're watching the film, see if you can pick out which is my ugliest angle. Don't jump to any conclusions. Just when you think you've seen the ugliest thing you've ever seen, give it a chance. There's always something worse. The girl who's supposed to play this girl here originally was going to be Kirsten Dunst, and she's a jerk, and then it was going to be Winona Ryder, and she's a jerk, and then I just found this girl a couple miles away from this gas station.
Can you tell us a little bit about, for those of us who may never have access to the director's commentary?
Oh my God, it's one of the best, maybe the best ever. Like, it's only on the Japanese DVD, so if you're lucky enough to find the Japanese DVD, have a player that'll play it, it has the commentary on it, and it's the the most self-loathing commentary ever. It is a lot of him just being like, I was booed, I'm ugly. And then he begins to just start selling the things that you see in the movie. He's just like, I'm broke. That jacket I'm wearing, you can have that jacket. It's this much money. Like, please email me at da-da-da to get the jacket. And that's sort of like what the commentary becomes, is basically his private eBay. And, but it's great. It's funny. It's funny because this movie to me is not funny at all. Like Buffalo 66 is a very dark comedy, but I find it very, very funny. There's nothing in Brown Bunny that I find funny at all. But his commentary for this is very funny. It's like a comedy. Highly recommended. He doesn't really go deep into the making of... I believe he brags that he grounded his own lenses for this movie. I think on the commentary he said, I did everything. I even grounded my lenses. So...
Is it it's ground. You grind your...
Yeah.
You don't
grind the lenses. Grind the lenses. He said he grind his own lenses. And... yeah, it's good. It's a good commentary. It's up there with the Gary Marshall commentaries and the Abel Ferrara commentaries and the Paul Verhoeven commentaries as the best commentaries ever.
Wait, who were those? Abel Ferrara?
Gary Marshall, Paul Verhoeven. Those are all the great, like, those guys give the best commentaries. And then the one Vincent Gallo one. Those are my favorites.
Right on. So, but all difficult. Maybe not Gary Marshall. Although
you don't know. He had good people maybe to protect himself.
Yeah, he refused to give Albert Brooks his money back in Lost in America, and that's enough for me. The guy's a jerk.
Yeah.
Schmucks, what schmucks? Schmucks, Wayne Newton. You said schmucks, Wayne Newton.
It's sad, like, reading about the longer version. I really want to see that, but I never will see that. Like, I wouldn't mind 7 more minutes of
the motorcycle
or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that. I love that stuff. I love movies where it's just people doing things. I don't know like how to describe it better, but like that's why I love like Escape from Alcatraz. Just watching Clint Eastwood just like do shit silently. Like this when actors and actresses can get into that place, I find that really interesting. Like watching people eat in a movie or whatever, and like just watching Vincent Gallo drive to that. The soundtrack of this movie is amazing. It's so good. Do you own the soundtrack?
I will by the time this comes out because I'll have dumped a bunch of it into this.
But like it's so like that Gordon Lightfoot song. Like there's nothing cool about putting Gordon Lightfoot in your movie, but he does, and that scene is beautiful. Like that's the shot because it's like that's when it's rainy and he's driving and this Gordon Lightfoot song is playing, and it's just so beautiful. And then using that song from that Richard Donner Twilight Zone episode, Come Wander With Me.
He said, come wander with me, love. Come wander with me. Away from this sad world. Come wander with me. He came from the sunset. He came from the sea. He came from my sorrow and can love only me.
Like, what a brilliant idea to be like, I'm going to take this song from this, I think it was the last episode of The Twilight Zone or almost the final episode, directed by Richard Donner. It's a song sung in the episode. And he takes that song and puts it in this movie. No one had ever used this song in a movie before. And that was great. Like, what an interesting idea to do. Like, who'd have thought to put that song in a movie? And it's beautiful in this movie, put it in a different context. Like, it's just like, it's so good. And then the soundtrack has a bunch of songs by John Frusciante, which aren't in the movie, but I don't know if they were like the original soundtrack, and then he decided to not use them, but he put them on the soundtrack, and they're great songs as well. Like it's really good. The music in this really adds that kind of sad, driving across. Well, I think I mentioned it, but it like those parts in the One Trick Pony where it's just them kind of on the road driving, and that kind of like sleepy-eyed, like when people are in a band, they kind of understand what it's like. That kind of where you're just driving on freeways and you're looking at the back of the same car for hours. And this movie really taps into that in the first part, you know?
Yeah, that was back when vans were still seen as places of refuge and creativity, you know? We're kind of working backwards from the climax of this film.
Yeah.
We've talked extensively about the driving. I think someone who listened to this podcast might get the idea that this is all just driving and blowjobs. But no. This is not that kind of film. This also includes these scenes. Well, I think I think of them as like three main scenes. There's, well, I guess four. There's and three of them are pickups. So there's three scenes where he picks up or has weird interactions with three different women that are all sexually charged in some way or another. And then the one scene with the mother where he tells the lie that sets up all of our preconceived notions going forward, thinking that that he's meeting up with his current girlfriend and not lying to her mother about her death. Which all of that comes rushing back at the end. But I want to just like kind of unpack those. So let's first talk about, because I feel like the scene with the mother also reminds me of you even suggested I go back and watch Buffalo 66, and I did, and it kind of reminded me of the scenes with Ben Gazzara and Angelica Houston at the table where he's just kind of looking away, like she'll be talking at Vincent Gallo, and Ben Gazzara is leaning as far to get out, almost to get as far as he can without getting out of the frame, like. And there's a similar thing happening here where he goes and meets with the mother. Now, do you want to talk about a little bit about? I think there's something special about that scene, but what is it about the Vincent Gallo-ness of it for you?
Well, it's just like he's basically like it's just him talking to the mom, but then also in the shot is, I'm guessing, the mom's mom, like the grandmother, I'm guessing, just sitting there almost looking annoyed that she's like in the movie. Like she's just like, why is this dude in my house talking to this lady? Like why is he making this movie here? Like it looks like she wasn't invited and she's just there and she doesn't want to be there, but they're keeping her prominently in the shot. And it's a very simply directed scene. I think it's like two angles of them talking, like one side of the table and the other. Much like in Buffalo 66, how it just kind of goes from one side. It just goes from all the different sides of the table. But it also so that scene kind of feels a bit like a documentary, a bit like improvised. Like it seems there's something very naturalistic about the interaction. And it's also really shocking. And I definitely think at this point in the movie, realize this is not the same performance that Vincent Gallo gave in Buffalo 66. It's very quiet. It's much more, it doesn't quite have the, I'm trying to think of the right word. Like him at Buffalo 66 is like, it's all ego and anger and just very, like opinionated. And in this, it's very just sort of quiet and sad. And like, he's just sort of like asking about this bunny, and he's confused by why the bunny's still around. And like, how long does bunnies live? And like, he's just kind of like wondering about why this bunny's there. It's a great scene. It's a very weird scene, especially because that old lady does not look happy to be part of this movie at all.
Another lack of consent in this film. I mean, it really does, like, that's a scene where, I mean, Vincent Gallo is not this character, but Vincent Gallo is still that guy. And you kind of get this feeling of like, if Vincent Gallo is hanging out with old elderly people, this is what it's like. Like, this is, it's weird. He doesn't belong, like, I've been in those houses. That's a very New England area that he's driving through. I think maybe it's in New Hampshire or Vermont or someplace, but it reminded me of Massachusetts. And I've been in those houses and those kitchens, and Vincent Gallo would seem really weird and off-putting there. Even at his best, which is whatever Vincent Gallo's best is. I just wanted to address that scene because I feel like that's the kind of thing that gets totally overshadowed in the discussion of this film about the climax of the film, when I feel like this weird moment that sets up, again, the economy with which he makes his movie. Like, the movie functions because we believe this lie. And we believe this lie because the situation is already so weird that we, we're just so confused by, and that of course we accept it. And then that's what makes what is otherwise pornographic into something that's poetic and beautiful and troubling in other ways. And that's that's the magic trick of this film. I don't want to extend the metaphor to pulling the rabbit out of the hat, but I just did. So, haha. So yeah, I just feel like that's I've never heard anyone talk about that scene. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's huge. Like, just from a writer's standpoint of figuring out, because the whole film hinges on that scene more than anything else.
The big scene that I'm always shocked no one talks about is the Cheryl Tiegs scene, which I think is the best scene in the whole movie.
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Can we set that up first with, so he has this scene. So he has 3 intimate interactions with 3 different women. The first is is she Lily? Right?
No, Cheryl Tiegs is Lily.
No. Okay. So who's Rose is the first one?
I think it's Rose or Violet.
Violet is the first one. Okay. So basically he pulls up in his van. We see her in the foreground and this creepy guy getting out of this van in a scene that if you just played slightly different music or any music
Silence
at all.
of the Lambs.
Yeah, exactly. And he walks in, he tells her invites her to come to California. She's kind of flirting with him a little bit, just like giving him eyes. And he invites her to come to California, and she says yes. And you're sort of like, kind of, I hate you movie. No, she wouldn't, only because you're directing the movie, and don't get in his van, and this is going to be bad. And it really, it feels very uncomfortable, similar to the trick he does at the beginning of Buffalo 66. Like, what horrible thing is he going to do to this woman? And then he takes her, makes her leave her home, says, okay, he gives her these beautiful, I think if they're beautiful or they're creepy, depending upon how you see the thing, but something she experiences as these beautiful romantic kisses. Go get your stuff, babe, and then we're going in 5 minutes. She goes in, and he drives off. And for me, there was a little bit of like, oh, I was so relieved that nothing bad happened. And also so impressed with how he just totally flipped my opinion. He went from being someone who I thought was doing one kind of ego trip to just being like, no, I'm ego tripping on a whole different level, buddy. You know?
Yeah.
This is not about, I don't know. So that's the first one. Now you talk about the next one, which you're right. This scene is...
It's a weird scene, but it's really interesting. I've never seen anything like it in a movie. So he stops off at a rest stop. Didn't you say you've been to this rest stop?
I feel like I've been there.
Rest stop that
yeah, I feel it is such a everywhere in California rest stop. Yeah.
And he goes to like the snack machine or whatever, and Cheryl Tiegs is just sitting there at a picnic table just by herself.
There are young listeners here. Can you tell listeners who Cheryl Tiegs is?
Isn't she was a model, right?
She was the original Sports Illustrated swimsuit model.
Yeah. Yeah.
The original, like whatever, depending upon whatever you think about that, there is an iconic place that she holds in the mind of, I think that there's a way that Vincent Gallo's using of her in this role speaks to, subverts and undermines something. If you imagine that this is who was probably on his wall, and guys, if he's a little bit older than me, so like that, this was all a little bit before I was paying attention. She was sort of the Farrah Fawcett generation, but she was a sexual icon for guys of Vincent Gallo's age who, like I said, didn't have porn in their, like, she was a pornographic icon, whether or not she was ever pornographic, like, even though what she was doing was, fully legit and wasn't pornographic, but that her appearance in this film and what you're about to describe, I feel like relies heavily on her iconography.
Yeah.
At least, yeah. Anyway, had to throw that in.
And so she's just sitting there, and he comes back, and it's almost like this weird, it's just like this weird unspoken magnet that happens, where basically he just sits down with her, and they kind of look at each other. She looks very sad, and this is like, she's older now, of course, like this is 2003, so she has kind of a weathered face, like she looks, beautiful but older. Yeah. And they just start kind of softly making out. You're just watching people make out in a movie, like, and it feels real. It feels like not movie making out, but like real life, like you're spying on people making out, and they don't know that you're watching. So it's very voyeuristic in a way. Like, I've never seen making out in a movie. Like, mostly nobody makes out in movies. Usually you kiss or you fuck and that's it. But there's not, like, just watching people make out. And it's just a long scene of them making out. And there's something beautiful and sad about it, which is like every moment in this movie between people. And it's so interesting to watch. It really is. Just watching two, older people making out with each other at a truck stop, or not truck, just a car rest area, recreational car stop. Yeah.
And then he gets up and walks away, gets in the van and drives off.
Yep.
And yeah, it's hard not to watch this scene as a metaphor, because it doesn't make sense in any kind of reality other than that, again, this is my ego trip factor is off the charts, in the sense of, okay, again, like, you're watching this, and with this one, this was the first sense to me of like, oh, well, this is a director doing an improv with this actress, and she's responding to what he's doing, but I don't know, like, it feels so real, and the knowing what we know about the film, that it's really just him with it. He's the cinematographer, so he's setting up shots and basically bringing his actor out to some place in the van, and then we're going to do this. And he's weird. Vincent Gallo is weird. And if you're Cheryl Tiegs in that situation, he got an amazing performance out of her. It's beautiful. If there was, it's hard to navigate consent in an improv, in a public place. Like, seems very safe, but the scene doesn't feel safe. The scene feels like raw and intimate and dangerous. And again, this wonderful feeling of relief when he leaves.
Yeah.
Like,
what?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the whole movie has that kind of danger feel, because it doesn't seem like there's anyone in the crew at all. Like, it really does seem like when you look at the IMDb thing, he's listed as production designer, set decorator, costume designer, makeup, like art department. It's all him. And the only place where there's names that aren't his is sound. So maybe there was like a few dudes holding microphones while they're doing this. But other than that, like, someone has to maybe move the camera. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like when you watch this, the camera doesn't really move, that he just kind of sets it up on a tripod and goes. I don't really know. But like, it definitely does have that. It kind of gives it that raw sort of like snuff film feel in a way of like, this is just made by some guy. He just made this movie by himself. Like, there's nobody else around when he's driving around alone. He's really driving around alone, and you feel it. Like, you really feel it in the scenes with the other people, that it's just them or it's just him. And that gives it this extra kind of loneliness to it, which is interesting. Like, you don't see, like, if this movie had a crew and it looked fancier, it wouldn't quite have that kind of beautiful emptiness that it has. And having that part of the movie, it just like adds so much. And the fact that he shot it on 16, which also gives it more of like a home movie sort of quality, you know, like film home movie, old home movie. Mm-hmm. Which is great. Like, and if it was shot, on 35, it wouldn't quite have that. Like, when he's that scene where he drives his bike through the salt flats and just kind of disappears.
Yeah.
That you just feel like he's the only one there for miles. Like, there's nobody else there. Like, literally, you're watching a movie like, this is a person, like, he might as well be on the moon, you know? And I love that loneliness that this movie has. And it totally works with the themes of the movie and story.
Someone has to shoot some of that, like when the van's driving away.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Someone's got to be following in another car. I feel like that's. I bet I bet there's a couple. I bet there's another car following, with food, and gear, and maybe the other actor.
Maybe 5 people total. Or
not even
crazy.
Probably not even that.
Like, I think there's more people on a porn set than there is on this movie.
You would know, having with your extensive experience on porn sets. I'm purely a consumer. Except for that one scene with Tracy Lords, but that's for a tale for another day. So, back to this film. Yes, that scene with Cheryl Tiegs is nuts. Want to point out that she never puts out her cigarette throughout the whole thing. The whole makeout session with Vincent Gallo, she starts holding a cigarette. She never puts it down. There's a way that there's just something that is so... For a scene that feels so dangerous, it also feels so casual and loving and odd that does feel like it's a metaphor for, like, these are all the relationships along the way that meant a lot, but then ended and moved on. But I don't know, it's just, it seems very poetic and, just tremendous use of Cheryl Tiegs. Like, why does it, like, maybe I don't feel like that's just stunt casting. That was phenomenal. Why isn't she in more films?
I know. I feel like, and people forget that modeling is in a way acting. Like, you're having to do certain expressions and hold your body in a certain way and put forth a feeling with your face and body.
Oh, and by the way, she's more like, she looks like the weathering on her is like, it's that what people complain about, that like, oh, when women get older, they just get older. When men get older, they get distinguished. She looks fucking distinguished, like beautiful in a way that she never was when she was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. She was professionally beautiful in this amazing professional, like, athletic way then. But who she is in this scene is
so good. Yeah, she's
like,
great. Why
why is she not in more movies after this? Because I don't know how you could watch this and not think, okay, Cheryl Tiegs is available for movies. Why don't we put her in something where she, like, doesn't have to drive around in a van with Vincent Gallo?
Yeah.
So then the third one is in Vegas, where he picks up a prostitute who he notices has a necklace that says Rose. I hadn't picked up on all the flower stuff, so good on you. And in this situation, do you want to describe this? What is this situation?
Well, I like this scene's great because I believe it's all one shot, or it feels like it is. And he clearly had all these actors set up at different parts of these few blocks in Vegas. And it's just him driving and he kind of slows down, and a prostitute will come up to the car and kind of be like, "Hey, you interested?" And he'll be like, "Nah." He'll drive around, find the next one, and then he finally circles back to one of the first ones, is Rose, and he lets her in the car, but they don't get to do anything, which he kind of just sort of, it's just kind of an emotional release is what he has with this lady. Like, he just kind of talks to her a little, asks her some questions, and it's just some emotions, and then he kind of just lets her out of the car
and gives her some money. Like,
and she's like, "Is that it?" And he's like, "Yep."
And this is the one. So the first two interactions, the character is, but also because of the way the movie's made, the director is just making out with his actress in these very, very realistic, intimate, intense ways that just on its own right now sets off alarms about consent. Like,
yeah,
all of them, in a way that I think the film portrays. It knows what it's building up to. It knows where this is going. So the director is setting up again this character as this guy, and then undercuts it again. He goes and he picks up this prostitute who is actually looking for sex, and then he kind of is going around not satisfying these three different women in totally different ways, which I would say that's the main sort of unifying element of his three interactions with these women.
Yeah. Just
I mean, they're not
very they're not empty in a way, because in the moment they seem fulfilling for a moment, but then it's just sort of like, and again, because of the way the movie ends, you wonder, like, is this all real, or is this all part of his thinking? Is this just his dream? Is he just seeing these people? Is he just walking past Cheryl Tiegs in a park and thinking he does this, or does he actually do this?
I mean, the whole thing, the Cheryl Tiegs thing, seems like he's driving and imagining a Sports Illustrated. Like, this is a fantasy. The whole film is kind of like this, like, super intense, like, incel fantasy of, like, that's kind of Vincent Gallo's whole filmography, is like, I'm a totally awkward guy who no woman would, like, they could see me coming, what a creep I am a mile away, but I imagine a world where they just want to kiss me. And that's what my movies are about, like,
because the way that they don't feel real. Like, the movie, like, the interactions between everybody in this movie feels, and actually the only interactions that do feel real is at the end with Chloe Sevigny, and that one tells you that it's not real at the end. But the other ones feel like a fantasy. It feels like a weird, this sort of like, what is this? Like, this can't be really happening to these characters, right? And maybe they didn't. It's definitely an interesting interpretation to think of all these scenes as being not things that actually happen to the character of Bud Clay, but just stuff he's thinking about.
Now, you recently watched this. You can talk about this or not, but you watched this with someone who did not have as good a reaction to it as
I watched it with my wife, and she saw this movie when it came out and hated it, and saw it and was not looking forward to it. When I told her we were doing this, she's like, "Oh, geez." And then we watched it, again, because it's COVID, so she can't escape, and I can't watch it somewhere else. And so we had to watch it while she was at work in the living room.
Oh.
So, like, it's sort of like she loved Buffalo 66, and she's a fan of Vincent Gallo in movies. But, like, she basically told me, like, she loves the first part of this movie, loves the driving, loves that. But once it goes to the Chloe Sevigny stuff, she hates it. And she hates that she's a ghost and is stupid. And she just, like...
Oh, really?
She's just like, the movie is just... I hate that the last half hour of this movie is so dumb, and I hate it. But, man, that first hour is so good. And so it's just like... And I've known her for years, and, like, always when this movie's come up in the video store or whatever, she's like, the fucking ghost blowjob, please.
Oh, Jesus.
I
just killing
If I ever come back as a ghost, please don't make it where I just have to endlessly give Vincent Gallo a blowjob just to make him feel better. It's yeah, not not a thing. Nobody wants to. That's a sad fate for any ghost. Is this to give him a blowjob to make him feel any sort of anything? Don't make a ghost do that. But I was reminded that there's another ghost blowjob in Ghostbusters. Dan Aykroyd gets a blowjob from a spirit in that movie.
Not one that'll make you cry.
I think that scene probably made a few parents cry. Like, why am I watching this with my children?
No. You know what? You know what? It's so funny. That is so funny because when you told me that you had a bad reaction to the film, I thought it was about the sort of like watching the weird negotiation to get Chloe Sevigny, the actress, to do this, to take the improv to this place. And no, it's not that. It's
the plot.
And to me, I'm sorry. Then the world is wrong. The world is wrong because that's not what the movie's about. It's just, that's what it takes to like. It's such an odd thing, especially, I'm glad that Roger Ebert finally came around on the film because I feel like the Brown Bunny is like as close to the vision, like the Russ Meyer vision of bridging the world that he came out of and big Hollywood features. That Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and I still haven't seen. Wait, no, I did see the 8 minutes, 9 minutes. How many minutes is it? The 7 minutes? How many minutes is it?
7 minutes? Does that seem right? Yeah, I think it's the 7 minutes. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. And there are a lot of ways that you could smuggle pornography as a cinematic language into legit films that would be so much more crass and less poetic and wouldn't earn it and would really truly be pornographic. To know that that's the trick you're going to play and build a movie that earns it as an emotional beat. And also, again, it's uncomfortable, but if you leave the uncomfortable stuff in, then that's art, And again, feel very different if Chloe Sevigny was saying something different about it. But again, I got to believe that she's out from, she's not in the van anymore and she could say whatever she wants to say. So yeah, I just feel like it's, yeah, I'm a little bit flummoxed because I was trying to set up a yeah girl moment against Vincent Gallo, and instead I got one sort of like the scene in Seinfeld where he's ratting on Bryan Cranston to his priest for converting to Judaism for the jokes, and he's like, "Oh, so this offends you as a Jew?" He's like, "No, it offends me as a comedian." So Vincent Gallo offends you as a woman? No, he offends me as a storyteller.
Yeah, pornography in movies is fine. It's just it's bad storytelling that's offensive. That's the real offense. Just tell a better story.
Oh, see, that's a matter of taste. I'm not sure I want to come back as a ghost and have to give Vincent Gallo blowjobs either, but
nobody does. I don't. But I don't want that.
But here's what I do think. I do think that a film about that, as far as a film about mourning a breakup, there's a lot of emotional beats that it hits that are really strong, and definitely part of mourning a love relationship breakup. There is an erotic element to it that is rarely in films. And if you what you have to imagine is that in the reality of that film, he's not getting a blowjob. He's by himself in a room trying to make himself feel better with a fantasy, which is something that I think a lot of people who would never have the courage to put it in a film and even in a blog post can relate to that experience if they're honest with themselves. I say themselves because obviously not me, but because I am, because I am just a disembodied voice. I don't even have a body. What would I be doing in that room? I don't know. I guess I'd just be commenting on it, just like now. I'd be standing in the corner giving my dissertation on whether or not it is an actual work of art, this blowjob, or is it just pornography? I fall on the art side. What say you, Bryan?
I think pornography is art. I think an art is pornography. I think that it's the same thing. Like, I think this is, it's both. Like, it's pornography if it's the definition of pornography is showing sexually explicit material, but it is art in that it's an expression made by a human being through a medium. So like, yeah. I think it's both. It depends on how you use it. If you're masturbating to Brown Bunny, okay, that's your thing. Or are you actually getting feelings out of this? Like, that's it just depends on the viewer and I guess you can say it depends on the intention of the artist, but at the same time, there are people who made pornography that people now look at as art and say, no, that's art. Like, that's certainly like the bulk of what Vinegar Syndrome puts out on Blu-ray is like movies that were just made for Times Square audiences and now people are looking at as art. Or there's been a big resurgence in people like my friend Evan has a great podcast where he talks about gay pornography movies and magazines from the 70s and 80s and looking at it as art because it is something made by somebody. It says something. If maybe their intention is titillation, but there actually is something more interesting there. And this movie definitely doesn't feel like it's made for titillation because it's so sad. Unless that's your fetish, I guess, is like sad. This is a really sad breakup blowjob. I don't know. But like, yeah, it's, I think this movie is definitely more art than porn, but it is porn in terms of this is an X-rated movie showing you things that are usually only seen in, pornography.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I did want to comment on one thing I noticed when I was rewatching Buffalo 66, which is just how much watching that made me think of the Spike Jonze, Charlie Kaufman films. Like just the feeling, the tone, the sort of the messing with form, and the scenes with the parents at the table. After having recently just seen I'm Thinking of Ending Things. It feels like they had to have thought about Buffalo 66 when they were making I'm Thinking of Ending Things, because it's very different but very similar, and there's something about the way Kaufman approaches it. Again, maybe because Kaufman isn't in front of the camera, that he can get away with exploring what he explores in a way that would be different. That's different when you're Vincent Gallo and you're in front of the camera. I'm not saying that they're exactly the same, but maybe there's something there. So, final verdict: we both love the Brown Bunny, and anything else?
Per your discussion before this episode, you made me watch the opening credits to the Evel Knievel movie, which I'm guessing you watched because of the motorcycle aspect. That is a great theme song for if anyone's like, the kind of tangent. If you've never seen the opening credits of the Evel Knievel movie called Viva Knievel, please, it's on YouTube. You know what? They should put that song over the first scene of Brown Bunny. And what's that movie? Let's see. I want to see someone do that. Like, put that song over that scene. It's such a good.
I watched this film, and it is almost as unfathomable as the Brown Bunny. The cast: Gene Kelly, Lauren Hutton, Red Buttons, Leslie Nielsen, Dabney Coleman, Frank Gifford, and Marjo Gortner. And when he was in pure Marjo-ness, like hot off
Wow.
of Earthquake. And
Wow.
it's weird. It is, but it's another motorcycle movie. In this case, Gene Kelly plays the dysfunctional Dark. This is maybe why I think there are many reasons that The Brown Bunny is better than Viva Knievel, but Evil in this is a movie that is set up like most movies about like that are like this, like starring vehicles to make him out as the most heroic person in the world, which also makes him ludicrous. Like there's just crazy, stupid scenes in this. If this was a different kind of podcast where we make fun of bad movies, we could definitely do one about Viva Knievel. But
we would never do that.
No,
on this
I,
podcast.
I think I would
No.
recommend it to some of like there are some that are people that are good at being funny in a way that isn't hurtful about it. But I do really, really recommend finding Viva Knievel from 1977 and watching this movie. And if not, just watching those opening credits, because this song, you know what? Let's just play this song out into our ads and stuff, and then
Great.
come back and we'll tell you what we're doing next week.
Love it.
Make that leap. He's a man with a dream and a promise to keep. And there's nothing too hot and there's nothing too steep. When he meets that crowd, they shout out loud, singing Viva, Viva, Viva Knievel, Viva, Viva, Viva Knievel. Viva.
Do you call yourself a music fan? Are you the one making the playlist for all the parties? Then you gotta listen to the Pinch Music Podcast, where we interview musicians, engineers, producers, and music lovers of all types. We even put together playlists for any and all occasions. So if you want to have the Beatles versus Stones debate, pick up some engineering tips, or just discover a new artist, you gotta check out the Pinch Music Podcast, all a part of the Paper House Network.
Radio 8 Ball.
Andras here. When I'm not co-hosting the World is Wrong podcast, I'm hosting and producing the Radio 8 Ball podcast, where we answer questions by picking songs at random, like picking musical tarot cards. We've hosted musical divinations for people like John C. Reilly, Patricia Arquette, Tig Notaro, and Fred Armisen, and hosted over 200 songwriters, providing the randomly chosen answers from Inara George and Dan Byrne to Mose Allison and Alan Toussaint. That's Radio 8 Ball, all one word. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and download our app from the iTunes App Store. Because of what we were just talking about, I kind of wanted to check in our intro episode. You talked about your work on your new book that you've been researching.
Oh, yeah.
And talking about Brown Bunny and talking about, or The Brown Bunny, and talking about Vinegar Syndrome and what you were talking about right before we went into our break there, it made me think maybe there's a connection you might want to, talk about what's going on with Emmanuel.
Oh, man, I'm working on it because I'm stuck at home still, again, year 2 now. I'm really trying to get this book done, and thankfully my wife loves me, and can tolerate me watching lots of adult movies every day while she's trying to get her work done. Um, and yeah, I'm deep in it, and it's interesting. There are movies kind of similar to Brown Bunny, like the one I saw today. Was a lot of driving, a lot of sex. The sex wasn't sexy, whether that was intentional or not. And it definitely has, and we didn't talk about it, but the Brown Bunny, like Buffalo 66, definitely has kind of a 70s vibe to it. Like the way it's filmed, the way the filmmaking has that kind of the toughness of the 70s. Yeah, but no, I'm enjoying watching all these dirty movies.
Do you have a thesis that's forming in terms of your appreciation of the Emmanuel franchise?
I don't know, because the way that I'm writing it and the way that I wrote Destroy All Movies with Zach is I kind of take it one movie at a time. It's sort of like building blocks, and I will see the patterns and see what the thesis is once it's done. Like that certainly happened with Destroy All Movies, where we each took the movie one at a time and looked at it for what that one movie was, and then when you put it all together, you see the trajectory of how punk was treated in movies. You kind of look at this big story. But we didn't know that big story till we went through all of it. And so I'm kind of and unlike the punk book, I'm actually writing this book chronologically. I started in 1959, and now I'm on 1975, and I'm going to go all the way up till, 2020, whatever I ended at. And so I am starting to see sort of not necessarily a grand thesis, but you're definitely picking up on patterns on how sex and sexuality is portrayed in movies throughout different years and eras, which is very fascinating. Like things that are considered taboo here aren't here, or things that are just sort of okay here or not okay here. And that has definitely been a fascinating journey, just to kind of see. Yeah, because these movies aren't technically pornography in a way. They're not like XXX movies, but they exist in the world of porn, soft porn. But just kind of seeing sort of the story that it's telling so far up to 1975 is very interesting.
I'm struck by something. I don't want to open up a whole can of worms here, but when Zach Carlson, who you co-wrote Destroy All Movies with, and who you write with regularly, as you collaborate on screenplays and productions, all kinds of things, just longtime friends, and you both spoken glowingly of each other on this show. And when he was on as a substitute, while you were writing, researching this project, he divulged to our audience in the discussion of birth, and particularly about Eyes Wide Shut, that he doesn't watch movies that have any sexual content whatsoever. He's opposed to sex in films. Now, when I pushed a little bit, it turns out that he's not quite as prudish as that might make him sound. But it does, I don't know, Dr. Sidney Friedman, as played by Alan Arbus, might look at this and say, is there a rebellion going on here? This is you have chosen to follow up Destroy All Movies with a project that is intensely alienating to your partner.
He would never work on it. No, it's
is that some Paul McCartney level passive aggression?
This is.
I love Paul McCartney, by the way.
This is my McCartney too. Yes, that's what this is. No, it's just I'm fat. I do a lot of stuff with him. But my own stuff is definitely very different. Like the movie that I finished making, or that I'm finishing making right now, is not at all like the kind of movie we would have written together. So I'm kind of off on my own little place at the same time as doing stuff with him. Because at the same time, him and I are working on a second edition of the punk book. So I'm doing both at the same time. So
got it. You just got to hide the Emmanuel materials. Well, it's okay now because you're doing all this not in person, but when we get back to hanging out,
hide it under the
carpet,
it under
the bed.
Yeah. My bed is teetering on this pyramid of dirty VHS tapes. So you Radio 8 Ball is your show where you answer questions by picking a song at random. Have you ever had a pornographic person on as a guest, like, or someone from the adult industry?
Oh, yeah.
As a guest on your show?
Oh, yeah. Several times. Nina Hartley has been a guest.
Oh, she's
on
great.
Radio 8 Ball. She was a guest when Jenny Jenkins was the musical guest. So can you know Jenny Jenkins from Olympia, singer-songwriter?
Yeah.
So that was one of the most perfect pairings. If you know Jenny, she sings songs that are very sexual. She plays a ukulele. She is just sort of like, I don't know. She's not. How do I describe this in a way that she's beautiful and big and gawky and Jewish, and I love her. And she's not. When I say she sings sexy songs, I don't want it to sound like she's doing some kind of hoochie coochie show. They're sort of very feminist, but also very sexy and like sexual empowerment kind of songs. And her whole way of doing it is just really friendly and down to earth, and not what you'd think of as anything having to do with porn. But when I told her that she was doing the show with Nina Hartley, she was super excited because it also makes sense because of her music. And then bringing together these two worlds just felt like one of the most perfect pairings we've had. We also had Diana Prince on the show, who is now the co-host on Joe Bob Briggs's new show, The Last Drive-In, I think it's called, on Shudder. But she's been in porn, and it's funny the way that I got to know her. She showed up at a horror convention where I was signing Nightmare on Elm Street stuff in cosplay as me. As my character, as Rick from Nightmare on Elm Street. And she's great. She's a tremendous friend, and it's so odd going places with her. We've gone to sometimes I invited her to one of the Nightmare events once because I knew she would get a kick out of it, but also I don't think she actually is significantly taller than me, but being around her, I feel like she is significantly taller than me because she's just bigger than me in every possible way, but also really sweet and down to earth and just loves horror. She's just super into horror films and music. And just a very sweet lady. I went to see Corey Feldman perform with her once. That was also with her and her son. Was really that was a I don't want to say a wild time because it wasn't really wild. It was really wholesome. But if you've ever had a chance to see Corey Feldman perform,
I've not.
Oh man, it's that's one like the first 10 minutes are so over the top. It's amazing. It's kind of like the beginning of the Viva Knievel film. It's and then he's like, we're going to go all night long. And you're like, I don't know if I can go all night long with this, but it was great. That was at the Roxy is such a thing. Anyway, none of that. Well, yeah. They've both been, Diana's been on Radio 8 Ball a couple times and Nina's been on Radio 8 Ball once. And we've had lots of like sex positive teachers. We were on a station in Seattle that was like a sort of a woo-woo commercial kind of station, like lots of ads for crystals and yoga and Kabbalah classes and
nice.
Vitamin supplements. And, we brought just like Vincent Gallo brought the sex to the Brown Bunny, we tried to bring it in a healthy way to the Seattle airwaves and other places. So, yeah, that's thanks for asking.
Well, I think we should do a World is Wrong about porn or something episode. It seems like in the future, it seems like we should do something.
Yeah,
I don't know what that would be or what movie that would be around. Maybe listeners, you can tell us.
Well, you know what? I feel like that's what we just did because
maybe
I was thinking because like the Brown Bunny, it's like one of the complaints about porn is that it's low class. It's like there's not a lot of. It's all wham bam. It's crass. It's not treated like sexuality isn't treated with any respect. It does, it doesn't deal with any of the like really complex and interesting questions around sex as far as consent and all these things. And so Vincent Gallo did make a movie that answers those critics. It's like, okay, you want your porn to actually have some art and some content and like to be valid as art and not just function for prurient, like just purely on that level. Well, here it is. And the world hated it. But I feel like this is the best porn film, if we're going to call it a porn film. This is the best porn film we could have covered to make this point. Because everyone else's is so personal. Like, if you were going to talk about, like, how would we do it?
Yeah.
You want to have a production meeting at the hour and at the 90-minute mark of this podcast? Probably not.
Well,
okay.
It's opened the door that we could do more. And if there's listeners out there who are like, hey, this porn movie is amazing as a movie, you should cover it. Please tell us. I would like to hear about that. So.
Well, I mean, doesn't Gaspar Noé have some stuff that crosses this line?
But I'm thinking, like, is there one that's not made by some arty dude that is just made within the porn industry that is really, really good? Yes, there is. I would like, I don't know which one to pick, but like, it would be interesting to cover one of those movies sometime,
Yeah, you know what? I would really, I would love to know who actually watches those films with their pants on, Maybe only people who are writing books about them, but maybe,
Yeah.
Maybe I've divulged too much.
Anyway,
I say The Brown Bunny is a porn film that you can keep your pants on too.
Let's put that on the poster. Says Joel Siegel of the ABC. Yeah.
Why are you giving away my credits?
So, coming up, you'll be actually doing the next episode with my Director's Wall co-host, AJ Gonzalez. So, I'm excited. What did you guys finally pick? You went through many titles. So, what was it you came up with?
Yeah. AJ sent me a very impressive and challenging and confronting list. And...
of Ron Howard films, I'm guessing.
He had Far and Away was on his list, and I just
he loves it.
And I just eventually I think we probably should do that one, but I wanted to have a fun time with him, and I wanted him to have a fun time, and I knew we couldn't with me just being like, really, you like that? But we settled on a film that I already liked, but we've already recorded the episode, and I realize now that I love this film, and the film is Vanilla Sky from Cameron Crowe, starring Tom Cruise, Penelope Cruz, Cameron Diaz, Jason Lee, and based upon the 1997 film Abre los Ojos, or Open Your Eyes. And it ended up being an epic conversation. Not only did we unpack this film, but we unpacked Cameron Crowe, we unpacked Tom Cruise, we unpacked the trend of films around the millennium that explore the question of whether or not we are living in a real reality or a dream. And that included even a conversation about the recent documentary from Rodney Asher, A Glitch in the Matrix. And most exciting for me, it gave me an opportunity to explore a theory I've had for a long time about the influence of Pete Townsend, and particularly his unfinished rock opera Lifehouse, as an influence on Cameron Crowe and his films, and something that AJ was unaware of, but in the end, I think he corroborated. So it's get ready, watch Vanilla Sky, watch Abre los Ojos, watch every Tom Cruise film, watch every Cameron Crowe film, find any materials you can on Lifehouse, including the video I uploaded to Vimeo, our Vimeo account for the Lifehouse Matrix, and then take whichever red or blue pill suits your mood. So that's what we're going to be doing next.
Homework.
Yeah. And if you have anything you want to share with us, any questions or concerns, I mean, certainly the Brown Bunny, Vincent Gallo, we know that we're stepping into a territory where it's going to be confronting for some of you, and we invite your communication. I mean, I hope we can keep it respectful, but if you feel in any way disrespected by us, I really hope not, right? Well, I feel like we did this pretty respectfully, but
yeah.
Is it possible to like Vincent Gallo in a respectful way? I don't know. And that's really something that I really am hoping we get some kind of reflection from our audience on that, because otherwise I'll just feel like you walked away offended and just didn't want to say anything. So you can find us at contact@theworldiswrongpodcast.com, on Instagram @theworldiswrongpodcast. And Bryan, I sort of jumped all over the Vincent Gallo thing here, but is there anything, last words you want to say to people who may, just to have thoughts or feelings about Vincent Gallo, the Brown Bunny, Emmanuel, a plea for creative porn?
I think it's just, just because you've heard bad things about a movie or it seems like it's scary to you, maybe that's all the more reason why you should watch it, because it'll either way be something exciting and different than the stuff that you're normally watching. So
indeed,
don't be nervous. It's just a movie.
Yeah, indeed. That is our ethos here. If you're going to be wrong about something, at least watch it first. So that will keep you from being, in that particular way, the world that is wrong about things. And so it is now with a moderately heavy heart that I have to inform you all that wherever you are, the world is wrong, and it's probably wrong about you.
How much is this?
$2. Will you be racing again?
Going to California. I gotta be there by Friday.
California. I always wanted to go to California.
Really?
Yeah.
It's nice there.
Is it? I thought it would be.
Is your name Violet?
Yes, it is.
Who made the necklace?
I made it.
You think you'd want to come with me?
I don't even know you.
Please. Please. Please come with me.